Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 562 XP chainsaw. The customer complaint is that it's sluggish in the cut. Well, looking into the fuel tank, it looks like we got a good looking filter on there. I don't see any puddles of water in the bottom. The fuel smells good. It looks like it's got oil in it. Probably not the fuel itself that's the problem. Let's take a little deeper dive into this. This is going to be one of those videos where you can play along and try and figure out where I tried to fool you in the repair. Now, you're not going to need to be a mechanic to figure this out. This is going to be like one of them whodunit mystery novels where the answer's in there. You just have to be observant. So follow along and see if you can pick up where I tried to trick you on this repair. First thing I'm going to do under the hood, we looked at the air filter, we looked down the throat of the air filter base, that all looked good. The spark plug looks decent. Looking inside the cylinder, this is usually better done with a camera because of the 10mm plug hole, but I can see above the exhaust port that there's no scoring in there. So I'll put this back together a little bit here, and on an auto-tune chainsaw, the next thing I usually do is hook it up to the computer and see if there's any error code stored in it. I'll also update the firmware right away. And that's why I pulled the starter off, is because I needed the number on the coil to install the proper firmware. And I did find that there was an error code in here, and part of the possible reasons for that error code coming on are, among other things, a potential vacuum or pressure leak in the crankcase, or a problem with the carburetor. So because I'm going to open a few things up here, I just went out and blew some of the schmutz off of it, right? Taking a quick look here at the serial number tag, and it's a 2014 model. So I think these saws came out in 2012, if I remember right. The video is not that old, but it is an older video. Your regulars might notice a few different things going on here than you see in the current videos as far as tools and my layout, or maybe even the quality of the video. So in order to pressure test this crankcase, one of the things I need to do is block off the exhaust. Right now I'm removing the muffler, and I'll put a plate on here to block it off. But once I got the muffler off, I want to take a good look at this side of the piston and rings, and sure enough, it's a Butte, Clark. Everything looks really good. So now that I know that it looks good there, I'm going to take this block off plate. This happens to be a factory plate. I've got a lot of plates that are just a 1/4 inch thick chunk of aluminum that I cut to size and drilled a couple holes in. It doesn't have to be a factory plate to do this job. On the intake side, that's a little different. Sometimes you need something a little bit more pre-designed, but not on all saws. So we got that plate snug down there. I'm removing the spark plug because I'm going to end up putting an adapter in here, and that's where I'm going to put the pressure into the crankcase. That's the adapter. Get that snugged down. There's just an O-ring on it that kind of holds it in place. A lot of times I won't even use a wrench. I'll just turn it in by hand, and it seems to seal pretty good. In order to block off the intake, the carburetor is going to have to come off here. And initially that sounds like a bad thing, but usually in these situations we want to look in the carburetor anyway. So I've loosened the 2 screws that hold the carb on, And I've pulled the air filter base out of the two saddles that it sits in. I pulled the fuel hose off the carburetor and the fuel return line off the primer bulb. Unhooked it from the air filter base. There we go. Everything looks like it's going to come apart here. That line I just took off was the fuel tank vent, or the hose from the tank that creates the vent. It vents right into the air filter base. Struggled with those screws a little bit, but we got them. I'm just going to lay that off to the side. I still have the throttle cable on there, but I want to get rid of some of the schmutz. Alright. I hold the throttle open a little bit, and then I can lift the ferrule of the cable out of the connection on the carburetor. And then underneath the carburetor, on each side, there's a bit of a hook. And it hooks into the carburetor and holds it up tight to the intake. Well, what have I got hung up there? That hook is just kind of hung there. You can kind of see the hook down there. It catches on the bottom of the carburetor. And when I pulled that off there, a little bit of dirt dropped into one of the intake runners, so I cleaned that out of there. Now I'm inserting a plug. This is a factory plug, two of them actually, into the secondary throttle air intake boots. And then I'm putting my finger in the main hole of the intake and now cleaning up all this debris. Just trying to keep it neat so I don't get any dirt in the engine. Alright, now we're going to have to put a plate over that main intake hole. And this plate also holds those two plugs in the bottom. And it also covers up the impulse hole. So we'll get this, I really shouldn't use the impact driver when I do this. You just got to be careful because these are smaller screws here. I checked the decomp button to make sure it was pulled out. And now I'm pressurizing the crankcase through the spark plug hole. I'm going to put 7 pounds of pressure on here. And ideally, if it sits for a minute and doesn't move, the saw is tight. Husqvarna does allow for 1 pound of drop in 1 minute. Although a leak is a leak, so if I see that, I usually go looking for it. In this case, it held, and now I'm pulling a vacuum, and it held that as well. So I've opened up the carb, and I noticed that the metering diaphragm, it's not stiff. It's usable. It's getting there maybe, but it's not stiff. But here's our problem. The micro screen is, you can see it's blocked up. It's all brown in color with dirt and debris. I don't think it's black from fuel line. That looks a little different. This looks like dirt got past the fuel filter and into the carburetor. How does that happen? Well, we might take a little closer look at that later in the video. When I looked in the tank earlier, it looked like it had a good filter on it. And in fact, I'll show you later that it appears to have a brand new filter on it. So I kind of suspect that he had a bad filter, maybe the original filter, and it was trashed. And then he put this new one on before he brought it into me, but the damage was already done, so it didn't fix his problem just by changing the filter. So on these carburetors, there's actually a little bit more. There's one extra piece in here. Here's a gasket on the pump plate. Here's the actual fuel pump. There it is. And there's a clear piece as well. Well, you might get mixed up what goes first, the black pump or the clear backing piece. And the easiest way to remember this is to work off the carburetor, not the cover. So I'm laying the fuel pump down because it's got the flaps on it that have to seal against the face of the carburetor. And then this clear piece backs it up. It doesn't have any flaps on it, so it couldn't possibly be the first piece to go down. I hope that makes sense. But now that we've got those put on in the correct order, we'll just tighten this screw down. Hey, the circus is in town. All right, on the other side of the carburetor, we have the metering lever and the needle. I'm not even going to look at that stuff. I don't think that has anything to do with our problem. And this kit doesn't have a new needle in it anyway. I just got a diaphragm kit. So we put down the gasket, then we put down the diaphragm, and now we're going to put the cover on it. Gasket went first, then the diaphragm. Now there's 4 screws holding the cover down. If you think there was something funny about the way I did that, there wasn't. That was not the puzzle piece you're looking for. I should have sped through this. Oh, the circus is still here. I don't know what I'm doing here. I kind of had this obsession with torquing down, then backing off, and then torquing down again. I went through a little phase where I was doing that. I don't know why. It has nothing to do with this video or the game we're playing. All right, secondary throttle assembly. Bolts down to the carburetor. There's one piece of linkage. The linkage comes in from the outside, if you're wondering how it goes back on there. You wrote up a work order for a Poulan chainsaw that came in box?
Yep.
The work order just says assemble according to conversation.
That's what he told me.
But what was the conversation?
With you. It's a guy with a southern accent. A really odd accent. I shouldn't say southern because now I don't really remember, but
I wasn't even here that day.
it wasn't that day. It was a day or two before. He said you told him to just put on there per conversation. So, I'm sorry. That's...
It was ready then. I'll have to call him. Okay, our carburetor's put back together. Let's slap it back into the saw. White connector for auto tune gets plugged in and then snapped into the side of the auto tune module of the carburetor. Now don't get carried away trying to zoom in and see what I'm doing here. I'll talk you through this, but I'm not trying to hide anything in the shadows here. This connector gets pushed up into a bracket on the side of the auto-tune module. That's not what you're looking for as far as where I'm trying to trick you. I want to push the carburetor up and snap it into those 2 latches so it stays there by itself. Here's my throttle cable wire. I had it pinched underneath there, so I just pulled it out. Now I'm trying to wedge the air box in between the saw body and the carburetor. Get it lined up. It doesn't look too bad, at least from here. Nice shot of the top of my head. And then there's 2 screws that will lock this down to the intake. This is another case where if you're going to use a driver, be careful or set it on a low clutch setting. Because some small fine thread screws that you could wreck. All right, this hose is our fuel return line. It goes from the primer bulb back to the fuel tank. And I'm just trying to route it up into the tabs on the back of the air filter base and work its way back to the primer bulb. And it'll get pushed onto the long stem of the primer bulb. Just like that. And then snapped into the tabs on the back of the air filter base. That looks good. Now we have, what are we doing here? Making sure my spark plug is tight, I guess. I don't know why we skipped to that, but that's what we're doing. You know, I get interrupted a lot when I'm doing these repairs. And sometimes I forget where I left off, whatever. Here it looks like I'm having another brain fart. The short fuel line goes from the carburetor to the short stem on the primer bulb. This is the one that pulls fuel through the carburetor. It's on the short stem and on the carburetor. That looks good. Alright, the air filter base has two pins that drop into a couple of saddles, one on each side, and lock it down into place. And then if we hold the throttle linkage open on the carburetor a little bit, we can drop the ferrule of the throttle cable in there and lock it in place. Squeeze the trigger and it all looks good. Check the choke lever, make sure that it functions properly and it's spring loaded when you push down to stop. And then we will install the air filter. Starter gets bolted down. I just kind of pulled on the cord there to get the starter pulse to all line up. So it would drop down flush so I could crank her down. Alright, let's look in the fuel tank. I still have fuel in here. I want to dump it out and take a closer look at it. Because I know I found dirt in the micro screen. And I looked at that fuel in the funnel. It didn't show it on here, but it looked good. And here's that brand new looking fuel filter that I told you about earlier. There's no way all that dirt in the micro screen went through that brand new filter. The thing looks perfectly clean. So I'm sure there was a dirty filter in there. And he changed it out before he brought the saw. Because changing the filter didn't fix the problem. The problem already was there with the dirt in the screen. So I put his fuel back in. There was no sediment in the bottom of the funnel. No water. It looked good. Alright, we're going to stop the video right here and give you a chance to consider where I tried to trick you in the repair. Something that I didn't do. And as an added bonus, there's going to be a second thing that I didn't do. But let's first look at the first thing that I tried to trick you with. In the part of the carburetor service where I was replacing the fuel pump diaphragm, I didn't install a micro screen under that diaphragm. I just laid the pump right over the top along with that clear backing piece and then put the cover on. This micro screen was never in there. So if you caught that, good for you. The second thing is right here where I don't push the fuel tank vent line back on the air filter box. Now, I missed this in the repair and didn't catch it until later on when I was servicing the bar and the chain and I had the saw tipped over and it leaked a little bit. I don't have video of me pushing the line back on, but that's what I had to do. So there was 2 opportunities for you to catch a mistake in this video. And good for you if you found those. Bad on me if you find a third thing, because I don't think I screwed anything else up. So that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 562 XP. It was a little sluggish in the cut because it had a plugged micro screen. Thanks for watching. Later.